The sun dipped low behind the baobab trees, casting long, golden fingers of light across the red earth of Mbara. The village, nestled between hills and hidden from the main trader's road, pulsed with the quiet rhythm of evening. Smoke rose from mud brick homes, children's laughter echoed briefly before dusk silenced their games, and the scent of woodfire mingled with the damp breath of the soil. It was on such an evening, when the wind carried strange whispers and the shadows seemed to lean closer, that the old griot, Baba Kalom, gathered the children near the well at the village square. He was a man wrapped in layers of history, his skin cracked like aged bark, eyes clouded with time, but voice still deep and full of storm. The children sat at his feet, wide-eyed and quiet, as the embers of the communal fire danced in their reflections. Baba Kalom always told stories, but tonight, there was something in the air, something deeper. He tapped the side of the ancient drum that lay across his knees and began, not with a shout, but with a whisper. You must listen closely, little ones. There are stories we tell to pass the time, and stories we tell to survive. A hush settled over the gathering. Even the dogs stopped scratching. There was once a girl, he said, not long ago, not far from here. They threw her into a dry well, an old, cursed hole the earth should have closed over and forgotten. But it didn't. It couldn't. Because the earth, she knows justice. She knows blood. And this girl, the earth refused to swallow. He let the words hang in the air. One of the younger boys shifted nervously. The dry well outside the village, a girl whispered. Baba Kalom looked slowly in her direction. The very same. And do you know why the earth rejected her? They shook their heads, though some looked like they didn't want to know. Because she was pure. Because betrayal has a scent, and it stinks worse than death. And because, my children, sometimes the earth speaks. You just have to know how to listen. The fire cracked loudly, as if in agreement. Long before your mothers were born, before even your fathers' names had been spoken, this village buried its sins. Deep, deep in the belly of the land. Secrets, jealousy, envy, even murder. And the earth, well, she was patient. She waited. Until one day, they threw in the wrong girl. And the land rejected the lie. Several children looked over their shoulders toward the black silhouette of the old well, just barely visible in the distance. It stood there, silent and cold, surrounded by weeds and a low wooden fence that leaned from age. None of them had dared go near it. They say, Baba Kalom went on, voice softer now, that her spirit walks where she fell. That her feet never quite touch the ground. That when the moon is high and the night is still, you can hear her breathing under the roots of the baobab. A small gasp escaped a girl with tight braids, but she quickly covered her mouth. The rest leaned in even closer. But the story I tell you tonight, he said, his gaze distant now, is not about her ghost. It is about her strength. About how the earth itself rose up and said no, you see, little ones, the earth never forgets. And sometimes, when no one else will speak the truth, she does. A shiver moved through the group as Baba Kalom placed a slow, deliberate hand over the drumhead and let the silence deepen. The night, once warm, seemed to cool. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled once, then stopped. The children didn't ask for another story that night. They walked home holding hands in silence, glancing over their shoulders. And from the well, nothing stirred, but the air around it hung heavy, like it was listening, still waiting. Nia's laughter carried like birdsong through the trees, light and untroubled, as she moved barefoot through the tall grass at the edge of the forest. Her fingers skimmed across the tops of herbs and shrubs, gently brushing their leaves as though greeting old friends. A small basket hung from her arm, already brimming with roots and blossoms, wild lemongrass, hibiscus, and a rare flower the old healers called Mpandaya Maisha, the breath of life. She hummed softly, and the leaves seemed to hum with her. At just 16, Nia held a presence beyond her years. Her skin was deep and smooth, kissed golden at the cheeks by the sun. Her eyes were wide, alert, and full of wonder, the kind of eyes that searched the world not for what it could give her, but for what she could give it in return. People in Bara said she had hands like rain, that whatever she touched grew strong again. After her mother's passing 2 seasons ago, Nia had come to live with her Aunt Wami, her late mother's older sister. The arrangement had seemed natural at first. Wami was a respected herbalist herself, a woman known for stern remedies and bitter teas that chased away fever and nightmares. But where Wami's knowledge was learned and practiced like a science, Nia's was instinctive. She didn't need to measure the roots or recite incantations under her breath. She simply knew. The plants responded to her, bending slightly in her direction, their scent deepening when she passed. Even the animals took notice. Birds landed near her as if to listen. Injured creatures crawled to her hut and waited at the doorway. One morning, an old goat collapsed outside a neighbor's home. Its breathing was shallow, tongue hanging to one side. The villagers gathered and shook their heads, ready to dig a hole for it. But Nia stepped forward, cradled the goat's head in her lap, and whispered something no one heard. She rubbed crushed garlic leaves along its flank, mixed in 3 drops of sap from a thorny tree only she dared to climb. By dusk, the goat was back on its feet, trotting clumsily behind her. Word spread. First to the families, then to the elders, and finally to the ears of the chief's daughter, who sent for Nia when she developed a strange rash that no one else could treat. Nia arrived barefoot, in a simple red and white wrap, her braids tied with strings of river shell. She brought no tools, just a bowl of river clay, a leaf of the bitter canando plant, and her own quiet certainty. The girl healed within days. That was when Wami's gaze began to darken. At first, Wami's resentment was like a trickle of smoke, thin, barely noticeable. She tightened her lips when Nia returned with another basket full of gifts, roasted cassava, beads, a pair of carved sandals. "They're only being kind because you're young," Wami said. "People always love what is new, like a shiny gourd. But wait, they tire of it quickly." Nia only smiled, always assuming her aunt's bitterness was grief in disguise. She tried harder to please her, cleaned the compound before sunrise, offered to help grind herbs, even shared her techniques in hopes of approval. But Wami remained cold, watching from behind her eyelids, calculating in silence. The storm in Wami's heart had a name. It was Jomo. Jomo was a hunter known for his strength and quick laughter, and for carrying fresh game through the village with ease. His visits to Wami's home increased soon after Nia arrived, though his words were always for her aunt, his eyes often lingered elsewhere. He greeted Nia with a gentleness that was different, not brotherly, not friendly, but curious, almost reverent. Once, he brought her a necklace made from porcupine quills. Wami saw it the moment he handed it to her, and her silence was a thundercloud that lasted days. One night, Wami sat on the stoop of their hut, chewing bitter cola and staring into the fire. "You should not let boys gift you things," she said without turning her head. "They give freely only to take more than they gave." Nia had paused, unsure how to respond. "I didn't ask him for anything," she said quietly. "Exactly," Wami murmured, eyes still on the flames. "You didn't need to." Still, Nia continued her quiet rituals of care. She spoke to the soil as she planted. She placed pebbles and patterns at the foot of her bed for protection. She hummed lullabies from her mother's memory each night, feeling safe in the power of love. But slowly, she began to feel something shifting. The plants in Wami's garden grew more brittle. The herbs didn't blend as well. The birds stopped perching near their compound. One evening, while gathering herbs by the stream, Nia found a small bundle wrapped in cloth beneath a rock. Inside were charred leaves and a clump of her own hair. She frowned, confused but not afraid, and returned home in silence. She did not see the way Wami watched her that night as she slept, fingers pressed tightly around a blackened root in her hand. Nia dreamed of her mother that night. They were walking side by side through the hills, and her mother whispered, "Child, light attracts both warmth and the bite of envy. Walk carefully." Nia woke to the sound of a nightjar screeching outside her window. She sat up and looked at the moon through the open thatch. It glowed full and golden, but somehow, it felt cold. In Bara, the earth was still quiet. But under its surface, something had begun to stir. The fever struck like a sudden storm, hot, merciless, and unrelenting. The chief's daughter, Asha, had collapsed during the mid-moon festival, her skin clammy, her lips cracked and gray. The village healer had tried everything: smoke baths, sacred roots, and bitter pastes. Nothing worked. For 3 days and nights, Asha lay in the royal hut, her breath shallow and rattling, her mother wailing softly with her head against the girl's feet. Word spread, quick as fire on dry leaves. At first, whispers. Then open cries for help. And finally, on the morning of the 4th day, a trembling servant was sent to Wami's compound, not for Wami, but for Nia. The girl walked slowly toward the chief's homestead, a gourd of cooled herbs in one hand, a thin blue cloth in the other. Her bare feet barely made a sound. People watched her pass, heads bowing, eyes filled with fragile hope. In the silence, Nia could hear their breaths, the sharp inhales of fear, the unspoken prayers. Inside the chief's hut, the air was heavy. The scent of burning sage mixed with the sharp, bitter tang of sweat and sickness. Nia knelt beside Asha and touched her wrist gently. The girl flinched, barely conscious. Her skin burned like sun-scorched metal. Nia closed her eyes. "Bring me water," she whispered, "and firewood. I need a small flame." The women obeyed, quick and silent. Nia pulled a dried leaf from her sash, Mulanji, known for chasing death from the breath. She crushed it in her palm, added drops of honey sap and river salt, then whispered something under her breath, a phrase she had never been taught but somehow knew. She painted 3 symbols across Asha's forehead with the mixture, wrapped the blue cloth around her feet, and placed the beaded anklet she always wore into the girl's hand. It was her mother's. She didn't know why she gave it. She just knew it was right. She stayed by the girl's side all night. By dawn, Asha sat up. Weak, but breathing clear. Her eyes, no longer rolled back in fever, searched the hut and found Nia. She smiled faintly. "Did you sing?" she asked. Nia only smiled in return. The chief himself arrived shortly after, dressed in red robes and carrying the staff of rulership. He looked at his daughter, then at Nia, and said nothing. Instead, he removed a sacred anklet from his wrist, beads carved from elephant tusk and dyed with the blood of a king's birth. It had belonged to his mother, a high priestess. He knelt, and with weathered hands, tied the anklet around Nia's ankle. "From this day," he declared, "you are blessed by our line." The village erupted in quiet astonishment. To be gifted such a relic was not only rare, it was spiritual recognition, an anointing. People stepped aside when Nia walked past, eyes wide with reverence. Mothers whispered her name to their babies. Young women watched with awe. Young men looked on with admiration. Back at the compound, Wami was waiting. Her arms crossed, her face neutral, too still. Nia walked in slowly, barefoot and glowing. "They say the fever is gone," Wami said, voice flat. "She will recover fully," Nia replied softly. There was a long silence before Wami nodded and turned away. "Good." That night, Nia felt an unease settle into her bones. The hut felt colder, though the air was warm. The fire in the corner crackled, but it cast no warmth. Wami did not speak as they ate, only stared into her bowl. Nia wanted to share the moment with her, the strange energy she'd felt while healing Asha, the way the plants had seemed to guide her hands. But Wami gave no invitation for such words. So she remained quiet. Later, Nia lay in her sleeping mat, her ankle still tingling from the weight of the sacred beads. She drifted off slowly, her breath rising and falling in rhythm with the night's insects. Then, in the dream, she stood before a tall tree, one she had never seen before. Its trunk was silver-gray and stretched into the clouds. Its bark was splitting, and from the cracks poured thick amber sap like tears. She moved closer. The sap was hot, and it stung her feet as it pooled at the base of the tree. She heard whispers, voices like wind through dried leaves. "The roots twist beneath your bed. Blood in the branches. Be wary, child. Not all kin are kind." She tried to speak but her voice dissolved. Then, from within the tree, a woman's face appeared in the bark, her mother's. Eyes full of sorrow, lips moving silently. Nia reached out to touch her, but the tree cracked loudly, and she awoke with a start. Outside, the night was still. Too still. She sat up, glancing toward the other side of the hut. Wami's mat was empty. Nia rose quietly, stepping outside. The moon was full, pouring light like milk onto the village floor. She saw her aunt standing at the edge of the compound, arms lifted to the sky, whispering something into the wind. Her voice was low, but urgent. Nia took a step forward, then stopped. A bowl lay at Wami's feet. Inside it, burnt leaves, a torn strip of cloth, and something dark and twisted. Was it bone? Nia stepped back into the hut, heart pounding. Her aunt returned some time later, saying nothing. The next day, Wami smiled at her for the first time in weeks. She cooked Nia's favorite dish, roasted yam with smoked pepper, and served it to her with a laugh. "Eat, my daughter," she said warmly. "You've done great things." But Nia's hands trembled as she held the calabash bowl. The dream clung to her memory like cobwebs. The tree weeping sap. The whispered warnings. Still, she smiled. She ate. And behind Wami's eyes, the storm gathered. Quiet. Patient. Ready. The moon hung low and golden, swollen with silence. Shadows stretched long across Mbara, and the forest edge beckoned like a mouth half open, waiting. Nia stood barefoot just beyond the village, her woven basket tucked under her arm, filled only with string and an empty gourd. Her Aunt Wami stood beside her, wrapped in a dark shawl, holding a walking stick carved with old clan symbols. She had come to Nia's bed just before dawn, whispering softly that a rare herb, Kawanga Yoroho, the spirit's thread, had bloomed early in the season. It could cure soul sickness, she said. They had to fetch it before the sun rose. Nia hadn't questioned her. She followed quietly, unaware of how quickly the night's stillness was thickening around them, how the path they took twisted not toward the familiar parts of the forest, but into a place deeper, older. A place that smelled less like moss and more like ash. The wind here didn't rustle, it hissed. The birds had long fallen silent. How much farther? Nia asked softly, adjusting the shawl around her shoulders. The air had grown damp and cold. Almost there, Wami replied. Her voice had a smile in it, but not the kind that comforted. Just beyond that rise. They climbed a gentle hill choked with roots. At the top, a clearing waited. It was round and hollowed by time, ringed by crooked trees leaning in as though to hide what sat in its center, a dry, ancient well. Its stones were cracked and blackened, eaten by weather. Weeds spilled over the edges. There were no birds here. No insects. Not even wind. Nia stared at it. I've never seen this place, she said, unease creeping into her voice. It doesn't smell like anything grows here. Wami stepped beside her, smiling faintly. Because things do not grow here, Nia. They end here. Nia turned to her, eyes confused. What do you mean? I mean, Wami whispered, this is where the earth takes back what should never have flourished. Before Nia could move, a sharp shove struck her between the shoulders. She gasped as the world spun. The basket flew from her hands. The stone edge met her ribs for the briefest second, and then she was falling into cold, stale air. Her scream echoed off the walls of the pit, twisting upward into the night like smoke. Then, impact. Her body hit the bottom with a thud that crushed the breath from her lungs. Dust rose around her like ghosts. She lay still, dazed, her side aching, her knees scraped, head throbbing from the fall. Above, the night looked like a coin-sized disk, impossibly far away. She heard footsteps, then Wami's voice, drifting down like oil. You should have known better, child. You thought the world would hand you love for free. That your smile and your gifts would protect you. Her voice trembled, not with regret, but with rage. The people came to me first, always. I built this name with blood and years. And now they look to a girl who speaks to leaves and walks with her nose in the clouds. Nia coughed, tried to rise. Pain stabbed through her ankle. Aunt, please, her voice cracked. No. Not ant. Not anything. You're a mistake the earth should have never let bloom. Nia stared upward, tears mixing with the dirt on her face. Why? Wami leaned closer over the rim, eyes sharp as glass. Because your beauty is loud. Because your spirit is seen. And because Jomo looked at you like you were the moon. Then, with no more than a hiss of breath, she spat the words that would echo in Nia's ears forever. The earth will swallow your beauty, and I'll be all that's left. She turned and stepped back. Silence fell. The wind died. Nia's breath caught in her throat, her body too weak to scream. Her vision blurred with tears, with dust, with heartbreak. She pressed her hand to the stone wall beside her, tried to find footing. The stones were cold. Old. They didn't welcome her. Then, from above, Wami began to walk away. Her steps, calm, certain. But after only a few paces, she stopped. The ground shifted beneath her feet. Just slightly. A subtle quiver. As though the soil had inhaled. She frowned. Looked down. Another tremor. A low hum beneath her sandals, like something vast turning over in sleep. She stepped back toward the well cautiously, leaning over to look. Inside, Nia lay against the stone, barely conscious, but the earth around her hand was glowing faintly. Not with light, but with warmth. Like breath exhaling from deep underground. A sound rose then, not a scream, not a voice, but something deeper. A groan. The groan of something old. Ancient. Wami stumbled back, suddenly unsure. The earth shivered again, and a crack appeared in the ground just inches from her heel. She gasped. From the well's depth came one final sound, a soft whisper. It wasn't Nia's voice. It was the earth's. And it was saying no. The night passed heavy and strange over the village of Mbara. The moon dimmed behind drifting clouds, and the trees stood still as though holding their breath. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled once, then went silent. But near the forbidden clearing, the air shimmered, not with light, but with pressure. A pulse. The ground around the ancient well twisted, groaned, and then breathed. Below, in the cracked belly of the well, Nia's still body lay cradled in dust and broken root. Her skin bore the bruises of betrayal, her limbs limp, but her spirit had not departed. Instead, the stones around her began to hum, not a sound for ears, but for bones. A rhythm, low and old, like the echo of a drum played at the dawn of the world. And then, it began. The soil stirred beneath her. Tiny fragments of earth lifted into the air and hovered like grains of ash. Vines curled upward from the cracks, wrapping gently around her wrists and ankles, not to bind her, but to lift her. Slowly, inch by inch, her body began to rise. From the depths of the well, Nia floated, head tilted back, her hair trailing like ink in water. Her chest glowed faintly, the sacred anklet still tied around her ankle burning with soft light. The earth did not swallow her. It returned her. Refused her. Rejected the weight of innocence wronged. By the time the first light of dawn broke, her body rested at the mouth of the well, cradled on the mossy edge as though she had never fallen. Eyes closed. Breathing slow. A glowing hush around her, as if the forest itself knelt in reverence. It was Tai who found her. The mute orphan boy had never spoken a word in his life, but he heard things others did not. Wind songs. The laughter of stones. The mourning of trees. That morning, he had awoken with a wordless urgency. He followed it, barefoot, wide-eyed, through the whispering woods. He was not afraid. The voices that guided him were not cruel. When he reached the clearing and saw Nia lying at the well's edge, he fell to his knees. He didn't run. He touched her hand. Warm. He touched the anklet. Glowing. And then, he looked up. A slow wind had begun to circle the well, lifting fallen leaves in a spiral. A single beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, cutting through the mist and settling like a crown upon Nia's brow. Tai pressed his palms together and bowed. He could not speak, but his silence said everything. By mid-morning, the villagers began to gather. Tai had run back into the village, panting, gesturing wildly, pulling on sleeves, pointing toward the woods. Curious, then afraid, they followed him. And when they saw her, lying untouched, serene, glowing faintly, they froze. "It's the girl," someone whispered. "The healer's niece." But she vanished. "She ran away," Wami said. "No. No. Look at her." One by one, the whispers grew. "She's not dead. The well, that's the cursed one. But it gave her back. It refused her. It's a sign. It's justice." Mothers clutched their children tighter. Elders murmured half-forgotten prayers. No one dared step too close. Nia stirred then, only slightly, her fingers twitched, her brow furrowed. A gasp passed through the crowd. Wami arrived last. She had heard the noise. The murmuring. She walked slowly, with practiced calm, clutching her healer's pouch like armor. When she reached the circle of people, they parted without warmth. She stepped forward, and saw Nia. For one brief second, her eyes widened. But then her mouth tightened. "She's alive," she said quietly. "She is," murmured an elder. "Found at the mouth of the old well." "I thought she ran away," said another, eyeing her sharply. "That's what you told us." Wami hesitated, just a beat too long. "She did," she said at last. "She left in the night. I awoke and found her bedding empty. I feared, perhaps she had gone into the woods. She often walked there." "She wouldn't have gone near that well," said a young woman. "We all know the stories." "But the well gave her back," another whispered. "That's not natural. That's sacred. That's judgment." Wami forced a small laugh. "You're letting old stories cloud your minds. The girl was never ordinary. You all knew that." "Yes," a quiet voice spoke. It was Tai's hand, signing gently to the elder beside him. The elder watched his motions, then said aloud, "He says the earth carried her out." The crowd grew even quieter. Someone crossed their chest. Someone else stepped backward. "She fell," Wami said more firmly. "She must have fallen. Hit her head. And now you spin ghosts and signs from a girl's misstep." But the murmuring didn't stop. "She's marked. She glows. She is not cursed, she is protected." At that, Nia groaned softly, her head tilting. A child gasped. Someone cried out. A woman began to pray. And still, the boy Tai remained by her side, holding her hand. Wami stood frozen. She knew this moment had changed something. Permanently. It was no longer just her word against Nia's. The village had seen. And the village remembered. As the sun climbed higher and Nia began to stir, the villagers knelt around the well's edge, not daring to touch her, but watching, waiting. The wind carried no answers, but their hearts heard the truth. The earth had made its judgment. And it had spoken with mercy for the innocent, and silence for the guilty. The first breath Nia took was not her own. It belonged to something older, deeper, drawn through her lips by the will of the earth itself. She gasped as though pulled from water, her back arching, her fingers clawing at air. For a moment, the world blurred in light and shadow. Shapes moved, familiar and not. Whispers echoed, words without language, yet somehow understood. Then silence. She blinked against the rising sun, warmth prickling her skin. She lay on woven mats in a shaded hut, perfumed with herbs and river clay. A boy sat beside her, wide-eyed, gentle, and when she stirred, he smiled and placed a wet cloth on her brow. Her mouth parted. Who? But no name came to her tongue. Not her own, not his. Not even the word for where. Her memories were gone. What remained was sensation, the texture of bark, the rhythm of wind, the hush of roots whispering beneath the earth. She sat up, slowly. The boy, Tai, helped her without speaking. His silence was calming. Outside the hut, she heard a bird sing. When she turned to look, the bird landed on the edge of the window and stared at her. Its head tilted. It did not chirp again, just watched. More birds joined it. A squirrel perched near the thatch roof, unmoving. A lizard clung to the post just inside the door. All of them still. All of them, waiting. She reached out toward the bird. And it did not flinch. Instead, it bowed its tiny head, once, then took flight. The next day, an old woman entered the hut. Her name was Sereni, a blind seer who lived deep in the hills. No one had summoned her, but she came with purpose, leaning on a twisted staff of ancient wood, eyes clouded yet direct. "I heard the earth groan," she said. "And when the soil cries out, I listen." She placed her hand on Nia's chest. The anklet, the sacred beaded one, was still there. Glowing faintly. "She doesn't remember who she is," Ta'i signed to the elder who had accompanied Sereni. "She doesn't need to," the old woman answered. "Not yet." Sereni sat and began to sing. It was not a song with melody, but with vibration. A hum that filled the room and made the walls shiver. As she sang, Nia's head began to ache, not from pain, but from pressure. A doorway, just beyond reach, seemed to pulse behind her eyes. Then, visions. A tree, its roots bleeding golden sap. A lion made of flame bowing before her. A river curling backward, its current rising into the sky. Faces. Dozens. Hundreds. Faces of those who had been wronged. Lost. Silenced. The humming stopped. Sereni opened her milky eyes wider. "The Earth Mother has chosen you." Nia blinked, dazed. Chosen? To carry what others bury. To heal what history hides. To listen to the cries of the forgotten and answer with justice. "I don't understand." "You will." From that day, Nia began to change. Not only did animals follow her, so did the plants. When she walked past wilted leaves, they lifted. When she sat by a dying tree, its branches would lean closer to her. She touched the cracked skin of an elder's leg, and the sores faded by dusk. She placed her hand on a stillborn goat, and it bleated back to life. Children watched her like she was a fable walking. Adults watched her with awe and a touch of fear. Under Sereni's guidance, Nia trained. She learned how to feel the breath of stones, to listen for the memories held in bones buried beneath the soil. She learned to read wind for answers and fire for truth. She sat beneath the sacred baobab for hours, eyes closed, learning to quiet her mind enough to hear the spirits who lingered between time. They came slowly at first, shapes in the corners of her eyes. A mother holding a baby. A warrior missing his voice. A weaver still clutching a broken spindle. These were the unremembered, souls that had never been mourned properly, their stories swallowed by silence. Nia became their vessel. But each night, when she lay in the hut, a single ache refused to leave her. There was something missing. A hollow in her heart shaped like a name. She did not remember the well. The fall. The betrayal. The aunt whose smile had hidden a knife. That part of her life remained sealed, locked away by the earth itself, perhaps for her own protection. But her spirit knew grief. It wore her like perfume. Sometimes, in the twilight, she would weep without knowing why. Once, Ta'i caught her crying, and he gently wiped her tears. He pointed to the anklet on her ankle and then to her heart. Then he spread his hands wide, signing the sky. She understood, you are more than the sorrow. Still, her hands trembled sometimes when she healed. Still, she flinched at the sound of stones striking together. Still, she dreamed of a fall, endless, breathless, cold. Sereni told her gently, you were broken open to be made sacred. That which is shattered lets in the wind. And the wind carries the truth. By the end of the season, Nia was no longer a child. Her eyes had changed, deeper, distant. She spoke less, listened more. The villagers no longer called her Wami's niece. They called her Earth Daughter. And though she smiled at their reverence, deep down, she knew her journey was just beginning. Justice has a long memory. And somewhere, the lie still lived, waiting to be unearthed. The dusty road to Mbara felt longer than memory. The wind whispered secrets through the tall grass, and the sky hung low, thick with clouds that threatened to rain truth upon the village below. Nia, cloaked beneath a traveler's veil stitched with dull gold thread, sat in a quiet corner of the healer's caravan. Her hands rested on her knees. Her heartbeat was steady, but her spirit pulsed with something deeper, something that the trees lining the path seemed to recognize. Beside her, Tawi rode silently on the back of a mule. His eyes scanned the horizon. They did not speak. They didn't need to. The earth spoke for them now. They arrived at Mbara just after sunset. The village had not changed much, same narrow paths worn into the ground by generations of bare feet, same cracked stone walls of the healer's hut, same twisted baobab tree guarding the square like an old sentinel. But something in the air was different. Heavier. Wami's name was still spoken with reverence, but no longer with warmth. Her patience had grown fewer. Her smile no longer inspired trust, it twitched now, as though she were hiding behind it rather than wearing it. People said her tonics had turned bitter. That her herbs spoiled overnight. That her eyes twitched in sleep, as though plagued by dreams she couldn't forget. They said nothing aloud, of course. Not yet. Nia kept her veil on. The caravan passed through like traveling healers always did, offering aid, prayers, and potions. They asked for no coin, only food and water. The villagers welcomed them. Desperation makes even the proud bow their heads. Nia tended to a field where crops had refused to sprout. She knelt, touched the soil, whispered something only the roots could hear. By dawn, the leaves stirred where nothing had grown for months. Chickens that had stopped laying eggs began clucking again. A lame dog limped after her, then suddenly began to run. People noticed. She doesn't speak much. But her hands. I saw her bring a baby lamb back from the brink. She healed my daughter's cough with only steam and stones. Wami noticed too. From her hut, she watched the crowd drift more and more toward the strangers. She ground her teeth at night. Her salves dried up. Her dreams grew darker. She saw the girl's face in the coals. She heard whispers in her walls. The anklet. The eyes. The silence. The guilt she had buried, like the girl she had thrown into the cursed well, refused to stay buried. One evening, a mother brought her fevered son to Wami's hut. Wami tried her best, muttering charms, grinding bark and herbs, but the child's breathing worsened. In frustration, she slapped the bowl from her own hands, its contents spilling. Try the strangers, the mother said quietly, lifting her son. They say one of them is touched by Nyakala herself. Wami flinched. They're just peddlers. The mother left without replying. That night, Wami dreamed of a well again, of hands clawing up its sides, of soil that spat blood. She awoke screaming. The next day, the village gathered for a communal healing ritual. It was tradition, when the earth turned dry and hearts felt heavy, they called for a blessing. The stranger healers were asked to lead the ceremony. Nia agreed with a soft nod. She stepped into the center of the clearing, surrounded by villagers. Her veil remained in place. The sun dappled her hands through the canopy. Tawi stood beside her, laying stones in a sacred spiral. Birds perched silently in the trees, watching. Nia raised her hands. She began to hum, not a song, but a vibration. The earth responded. Dust swirled upward in coils. A warmth spread from her palms to the people around her. Then a wind blew. Soft, but sure. It caught the corner of her veil. She reached to hold it, but her beads shifted. The sacred anklet slid forward, catching a beam of sunlight. Wami, standing at the edge of the crowd, saw it. Her breath stopped. Her knees buckled slightly. That anklet. The chief's anklet. The one she buried with the girl. It couldn't be. No, it was. The color, the threading, the pattern of beads. She had seen it in dreams. Now it glowed before her. She staggered backward. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes darted across the crowd. Had anyone else seen? Nia looked up. Their eyes met. And in that single, silent gaze, something ancient passed between them, like lightning through the soul. Wami felt it like a slap. But the others saw, too. They saw the healer's face go pale. They saw her clutch her stomach. They saw her mouth tremble. They turned back to the stranger, and saw, for the first time, the shape of the girl they once knew. The one who had vanished. The one Wami said had run away. The murmurs began. She looks like... No. It can't be. Is that... Nia? Wami shook her head. No. It's not her. She's dead. She ran, she fell. But the villagers no longer listened. Their gazes shifted. Their memories stirred. Nia lowered her veil slowly. She said nothing. Only looked. And that was enough. In the air hung a storm that hadn't yet broken. But the clouds were gathering. Truth was coiling around the village like a serpent preparing to strike. The earth had been patient, but not forgetful. And Wami knew, deep in her bones. Judgment had arrived, not with fire, but with a face she once tried to erase. The baobab tree stood still, but the air around it quivered like a drum skin. All of Mbara had gathered, young and old, their faces carved with uncertainty and long-held silence. Smoke from ritual herbs curled through the air. At the center of the square sat the elders, the village council, draped in ceremonial robes. Their expressions were solemn. Heavy. Wami was brought forward, not in chains, but by expectation. She walked with trembling pride, her chin raised, her steps unsteady. Her voice, when she first spoke, was sharp with defense. You accuse me of spirits? Of ghost tales and desert dreams? The girl ran away. We all know grief plays tricks on memory. But as she stood in the center, the earth beneath her gave a single, low rumble. Not loud. But undeniable. The crowd murmured. The council looked to one another. It began as a trial of words. Wami was asked to account for Nia's disappearance. For her lies. For the night she claimed Nia had left in anger, never to return. For why the girl who had healed so many had never sent a word back. Wami clung to the story she had told for years, but her eyes betrayed her. Then Nia stepped forward. No longer veiled. No longer silent. She walked slowly, as if every step was a reckoning. Her feet seemed to touch the soil like it remembered her. Around her, the birds stilled. The air shifted. She wore the anklet now openly, beads humming faintly with life. I remember, she said quietly. The words cut through the wind like stone through cloth. I remember the day you gave me herbs for sleep. I remember waking in the dark. Cold walls. No sky. And the sound of dirt falling. The crowd gasped. Wami's mouth opened, but no denial came. I called your name, Nia said, her voice trembling. I waited for you to come back. But only the silence answered. Then the drummers began. A rhythm older than any tongue. For men circled the trial space, hands beating truth into the ground. The tempo quickened. The people began to sway, an involuntary movement, as though their bones recognized the sound. Nia clutched her head. The world around her bent. Memories surged, rushing like floodwaters. Wami's eyes gleaming in moonlight. The hiss of snakes in dry grass. The thud of her body hitting the bottom of the well. The ancestral dreams. The way the soil refused to keep her. Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. Instead, the earth split. Not wide, just a single line cracking near the old well. From it rose light. A golden glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. And within it, voices. Shapes. Faces formed in the dust and drift, ancestors, cloaked in mist and stars. One of them spoke in a voice that did not use words but was heard in every heart. She is not the only wound. Then came names. Secrets. A man in the crowd clutched his chest as his dead sister's voice called him out for the betrayal of land. An elder's face turned white as a spirit exposed the child he had disowned. A woman fell to her knees when her mother's ghost whispered of lies spun to secure a marriage. Tears flowed. Some tried to flee, but found their legs heavy. The air held them in place. Justice, when it arrives through spirit, holds no favorites. Wami fell to her knees, clutching her head. I was only angry, she wailed. I was tired of her light. Of how people loved her more than they ever loved me. Her voice cracked. She reminded them of her mother. And her mother took everything. Nia closed her eyes. Tears slid down her cheeks. I only wanted peace, Wami sobbed. But she grew, and they loved her more. A silence fell. Not pity. Not even hatred. Just silence. And in that silence, the ancestors spoke again, not in scolding, but with a chilling decree. Truth cannot rot in soil. It rises. Always. Wami's shoulders sagged. Her head bowed. Her pride had broken. The well behind her, once dry, now gurgled faintly. Water shimmered at its mouth, as if fed by tears instead of rain. The council stood. Elder Jabari stepped forward. This village has hidden too much beneath its feet. May this trial be the first of many. We do not banish truth. We must carry it. And so, they declared, Wami would no longer serve as healer. She would remain among them, but as a servant to truth, charged with tending graves, listening to the earth, remembering the forgotten. Her punishment was not exile, but reflection. A slow burning of shame beneath the weight of memory. The rest of the village? They too were left raw. Opened. Made to confront their own shadows. And Nia? She stood at the center of it all, neither judge nor victim, but something more. A vessel for truth. A daughter of earth and spirit. And though the drumming stopped, the echoes remained. For justice had unfolded, not in blood, but in revelation. And nothing in Bara would ever sleep as soundly again. The morning after the trial, the sky hung with a heavy, golden stillness. Bara woke slowly, as if the weight of centuries had finally been acknowledged in a single night. Smoke from cooking fires drifted higher, gentler. Even the animals moved with quiet reverence, aware that the village had crossed an unseen threshold. Wami stood before the council for the final time. She was not bound. Her hands were free, but her spirit shook visibly. The once proud healer now bore the look of someone hollowed from the inside, her eyes bloodshot, her lips cracked and silent. She did not plead. She did not deny. The ancestors had spoken. The earth had moved. Elder Jabari stepped forward, holding a gourd filled with sacred soil. This is the voice of the earth, he said. And it has offered you a choice. He poured the soil in a small circle at her feet. The dust spiraled as though alive, then split down the middle. You may walk away, into exile, across the river where no roots will recognize your feet. But you will leave your voice behind. Your words belong to the past. You will not be allowed to speak of what happened. The spirits have claimed that right. A long pause. Or, he continued, voice low, you may stay and be swallowed by the earth in shame. You will not die, but you will be held beneath, without light, without sound, for the rest of your days. A keeper of forgotten sorrow. The village waited. Not with anger. Not even with expectation. Just silence. Wami looked at the ground. Then at Nia, who stood not among the council, but beneath the old baobab, watching quietly, a wreath of healing herbs hanging from her neck. Wami's lips trembled. Her eyes filled. She stepped forward, over the cracked line in the soil, into the path of exile. The soil hissed faintly. The wind grew sharp. A sudden gust blew through the trees, lifting the leaves in a spiral. A glowing pulse passed over Wami's throat. She gasped. And her voice was gone. Not her breath, not her life, only her sound. Her scream of shock never came. Her mouth opened, but only silence fell. She tried to speak. Her hands flew to her throat. Nothing. A heavy stillness rippled outward as the realization spread. She would walk the earth in silence. A story untold. A voice denied. 2 elders approached and handed her a travel pouch. She took it with shaking hands, bowed her head, and walked into the forest path without another look back. The trees closed behind her. Not a single bird sang as she vanished. When she was gone, the people turned to Nia. She had not demanded vengeance. She had not asked for this. Yet it had come. And now it was she who stood as a living bridge, between spirit and soil, between the old ways and the path ahead. She did not raise her voice. She did not proclaim herself. But when she walked, the children followed. When she tended the sick, people wept with relief. The cursed well, once a place of fear, was sealed by her hands, with stones marked in sacred ash, inscribed with symbols of protection. She laid a garland of white lilies upon its stones. For truth, she whispered, and peace. That night, the village gathered one final time under the stars. No counsel. No judgment. Just presence. Drums played, not for trial, but for healing. Dancers moved like wind across sand. A fire crackled in the center of the square. Tai sat at Nia's side, as always. He held a wooden carving in his hand, the shape of the old well, with a spirit rising from it. Nia turned to him and smiled gently. "You're safe now," she said softly. He looked up. And for the first time since anyone had known him, he spoke. A whisper. A truth. A prophecy. The earth remembers. A hush spread through the crowd. Tears welled in eyes. Some knelt. Others placed hands on their hearts. Nia did not weep. She simply placed her hand on Tai's shoulder. "Yes," she said. "It always does." From that day, the village changed. No more secrets buried. No more whispers ignored. Every year, they held a day of remembrance at the sealed well. Children placed stones for truth. Elders recited stories long hidden. Wounds were named, and in naming, they began to close. And Nia? She never called herself a healer again. She didn't need to. The earth had named her long ago. And it was enough. ChatGPT said. The children gathered at the foot of the great tree, its roots curling protectively over a ring of blessed stones, the very place where the cursed well once gaped. Now, it was a place of life. The tree towered above them, its leaves whispering secrets to the wind, its branches heavy with blossoms that glowed silver in moonlight and gold in the sun. Some said it had never bloomed like that before Nia sealed the well. Others claimed it was the Earth Mother's mark, proof that the past had been acknowledged, and the future nurtured in peace. A fire crackled nearby, more for comfort than heat. The twilight wrapped around the children like a wool shawl. They were from many villages, drawn each season to this sacred ground to hear the stories of a woman who had once been thrown away, and had been cradled by the earth itself. At the center of the ring sat a man, tall and lean, with eyes like quiet fire. His hair, streaked with gray, was tied in a long cord behind his back. His voice had become one of legend, not for how often he used it, but for how deeply it could reach when he did. Tai, the silent boy who once found a body glowing in death, was now the voice of stories. A griot not only by training, but by fate. He struck a simple rhythm on his drum, a heartbeat, slow and steady. The children fell silent. Even the trees seemed to lean closer. "Where you sit," he began, once yawned a mouth in the ground. It was not a place of water or life, but one of secrets. It took in only those whom shame could swallow. He paused, scanning the eager faces, each lit by firelight. But once, just once, it spit someone out. The children gasped, some already knowing the tale, others hearing it for the first time. Her name was Nia. She was no warrior. She carried no spear. Her only weapons were leaves, and kindness, and dreams. But kindness is dangerous to the envious. And dreams are feared by those who have stopped dreaming. He traced a circle in the dirt with a twig, recreating the old well. She was betrayed, he said, voice quieter now. By blood. By someone who should have loved her. She was pushed into darkness and left to die. The children leaned in. But the earth said no. Tall he stood, his hands dancing as he spoke, like branches swaying. She did not belong to the rot. She belonged to the sun. So the earth raised her back, marked by spirit. Her voice came back with the wind. Her hands healed wounds deeper than skin. Her eyes saw what the living forget, and what the dead remember. A girl in the front whispered, "Was she scared?" He nodded slowly. "Yes." But she walked through fear as one walks through smoke. It touched her, but did not stop her. She became the first daughter of the earth. And with each place she stepped, healing grew like vines from footprints. The tree's leaves stirred. He continued. She built no house. She wandered. From village to village, she listened. She stitched broken hearts, delivered truth to aching bones, and reminded people that silence does not mean peace. A soft breeze blew through the branches, scattering petals. One landed on the drum. Tali picked it up. When she passed, he said, the earth did not take her body either. It scattered her across roots and rivers. And this tree, he gestured behind him, grew from the very place where she once fell. The children looked up in awe, some reaching out to touch the bark. Tali crouched again, this time lowering his voice to a hush that only fire and children could hear. I was there, he said. I was the boy who found her, glowing like a morning star. I was the one who could not speak, until she came back. He touched his throat gently. My first words were about her. My last will be too. Silence fell like dew. Then he leaned forward, and said the words as if they were being spoken for the very first time. Betrayal may dig a grave, but the earth knows who belongs to light. The fire cracked. The wind answered with a soft sigh. And behind him, the tree bloomed just a little more.